After the divorce, the pregnant wife married a millionaire. But what happened next shocked her ex. In a peaceful suburban neighborhood just outside of Seattle, Jenna Morales believed her marriage was unbreakable. Until it wasn't. Left with a newborn son and a shattered heart, she learned that vows could dissolve as quickly as they were spoken. Clutching her baby boy tight, she braced herself for a future without the man she once cherished. Then, like an unexpected sunrise, a charismatic millionaire named Damien Callahan entered her life. Their whirlwind romance and sudden marriage made waves across local news. But what followed would shake Jenna's ex-husband to his core and unravel everything he believed to be true. Because sometimes, second chances come wrapped in secrets no one sees coming. Jenna Morales never imagined divorce papers would scar the coffee table in the living room she had lovingly decorated. The pale blue walls, once filled with laughter, now radiated a hollow silence. Her husband, no, ex-husband, she corrected bitterly, Ryan Carter, packed the last of his belongings into worn cardboard boxes. He had insisted their split was mutual, but deep down, Jenna felt blindsided. They had been together since their early 20s, building a relationship that survived late-night takeout and cramped apartments. For a time, it seemed that love alone could weather anything. But over the years, financial stress chipped away at Ryan's patience. His obsession with climbing the corporate ladder slowly suffocated the simple joys they once shared. When Jenna told him she was pregnant, she hoped it might bring them closer again. Instead, Ryan's frustrations spiraled. He claimed they weren't ready to be parents. The arguments that followed turned toxic. Now, holding her 6-month-old son Leo in her arms, Jenna watched Ryan's tense shoulders as he hauled the last box out. At the doorway, he paused, glancing from her to the baby. A flicker of emotion passed across his face. Regret, sorrow, guilt? She couldn't tell, but the moment vanished quickly. He muttered a goodbye and disappeared into the drizzle. The metallic thud of the car trunk slamming shut echoed through the gray afternoon. Jenna collapsed onto the couch, tears streaking down her cheeks. Exhausted and broken at 31, she might have fallen apart completely, if not for Leo. Her baby's warm breath and tiny coos reminded her that she couldn't afford to break. She had a little soul depending on her. Her son's gentle coo reminded her that she couldn't afford to fall into despair. A tiny soul was counting on her. In the stillness that followed, Jenna let her gaze drift to the wedding photos arranged neatly on a side table, their beaming smiles frozen from brighter days. She shut her eyes and took in a shaky breath. She had to move forward. But moving forward wasn't heroic. It was exhausting. There were nights she cried silently into a pillow while Leo slept beside her. Nights when the weight of bills, loneliness, and betrayal pressed so hard on her chest she thought she might shatter. She leaned on her old administrative job at a small nonprofit, barely scraping by in a house that now felt far too empty. Her parents, though loving, lived in Oregon and were struggling with health issues of their own. Jenna refused to burden them. Sometimes she whispered apologies into the dark. Apologies to Leo for not being able to give him more, to herself for trusting a man who walked away, to the future she once believed in. "Goodbye, Ryan," she whispered, pressing a soft kiss to Leo's forehead. The baby gripped a lock of her hair, babbling softly. In that sweet, innocent sound, Jenna felt the faintest flicker of hope. If heartbreak had taught her anything, it was this. Love could break, but a mother's devotion never would. In the weeks that followed, Jenna wrestled with questions about who she was now and what came next. She began forging a new path, one where she shielded Leo from the debris of the past. There were setbacks. Breakdowns in the grocery store parking lot, rejection letters for better-paying jobs, sleepless nights spent calculating if her paycheck would last until Friday. But still, she moved forward. What she didn't know was that fate was about to introduce someone who would upend everything she believed about second chances, and shake Ryan, the man who once vowed to love her forever. Months passed slowly. Each day was a quiet testament to Jenna's resilience. She juggled motherhood, bills, and a simmering sense of betrayal. Her job at the nonprofit, Safe Start, kept the lights on. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her purpose. She helped struggling families find housing and job opportunities, and in doing so, reminded herself she still had something to offer the world. One brisk November morning, Jenna arrived at the Safe Start office balancing a diaper bag, a lukewarm coffee, and a bundle of client files. The crisp Seattle air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed the sting. It woke her up. After dropping Leo off at the small daycare corner, run by kind-hearted retirees, she hustled to her desk. No sooner had she sat down than her supervisor, Monica Harper, called her into a meeting. Expecting routine updates, Jenna was startled to find a tall, sharply dressed man already seated at the conference table. His calm presence filled the room, from the clean lines of his tailored charcoal suit to the polite, measured smile he offered. "This is Damien Callahan," Monica said warmly, gesturing toward him. "He's here to discuss a potential partnership with Callahan Enterprises. They're exploring ways to fund some of our programs." Jenna's eyebrows lifted in surprise. She had definitely heard that name before. She had heard the Callahan name murmured in nonprofit circles. Apparently, Damien Callahan was known for his strategic investments and carefully selected charitable partnerships. Jenna extended a polite handshake, doing her best to ignore how his gaze lingered on her just a heartbeat longer than expected. Damien explained that he was currently exploring nonprofit organizations addressing housing instability. He asked sharp, thoughtful questions about Safe Start success metrics, community engagement, and long-term goals. Unexpectedly, Jenna spoke up, outlining the challenges families faced: joblessness, mental health issues, lack of access to healthcare, and childcare barriers. She shared stories from her daily work, her voice laced with raw sincerity. Damien listened with full attention, occasionally jotting down notes. Something about his calm, respectful manner and the depth of his inquiries soothed her usual nerves. He had none of the smug entitlement she typically expected from high-powered philanthropists. At the end of the meeting, Damien thanked both her and Monica and promised to send his team for a deeper program assessment. Then he looked at her. "Your dedication is impressive," he said, nodding. "I can sense your passion. It's rare." She blushed, mumbling a quick thank you before hurrying off to pick up Leo for their midday break. But even as she walked, Jenna couldn't stop her thoughts from circling back to the quiet energy Damien Callahan radiated. There had been a genuineness in his voice she hadn't anticipated. From a millionaire, no less. That evening, back at her small rented home, Jenna spoon-fed Leo mashed carrots while picking up stray toys from the living room floor. Still, she couldn't shake the memory of Damien's unwavering gaze or the flutter in her chest when he addressed her directly. Pushing the silly thought aside, she reminded herself of what truly mattered: bills, groceries, and Leo's well-being. What she didn't realize was that her chance meeting with a powerful philanthropist was just the beginning. A ripple in the pond that would eventually grow into a wave, one that would reach her ex-husband's doorstep and shake the foundation of everything he thought he knew. Over the next few weeks, Callahan Enterprises quietly conducted a comprehensive audit of Safe Start's programs, combing through metrics and impact reports. Staff buzzed nervously, hoping this powerful firm might become a consistent and vital funding source. Jenna juggled her usual workload: client meetings, family support sessions, and occasionally led mini tours for the visiting analysts. Through it all, she rarely saw Damien, though Monica updated her about his growing interest in some proposed expansions. But one late afternoon, just as she was preparing to leave for the day, Damien appeared unexpectedly at her desk. "I'm glad I caught you," he said, holding a sleek black folder. "I've gone over the final reports, and I'd love to get a more personal perspective from you. Over coffee, maybe? If you have time." Normally, Jenna would have hesitated, especially since it was after regular business hours. But she remembered Monica's emphasis on how vital Callahan Enterprises' support could be. And more than that, something in Damien's voice, calm, intentional, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. And she couldn't ignore the flicker of curiosity sparking in her chest. "Sure," she said, checking the time. Leo was in daycare until 6. She had a little window. There's a cafe just down the block. They ended up at a cozy spot, softly lit by warm Edison bulbs. The rush hour crowd created a gentle hum around them, but Jenna found herself oddly at ease. Damien pulled out a sleek notebook and began asking thoughtful, probing questions about Safe Start's daily challenges, the emotional toll on the staff, and Jenna's personal experience. At first, she answered with guarded professionalism, but something about Damien's steady eye contact and the way he really listened chipped at her restraint. She spoke candidly, sharing heartbreaking accounts of single mothers sleeping in their cars, of children caught in vicious poverty cycles. At one point, she paused mid-sentence, blinking away tears, and was surprised to see him quietly set his pen down, not to interrupt, but to simply hold space for her words. Her voice trembled at times, thick with emotion. Damien listened with quiet empathy, taking meticulous notes. He didn't offer hollow sympathy. Instead, he nodded when appropriate, his expression tightening with the weight of what she shared, as though he carried it with her. When they ran out of formal discussion points, Jenna moved to gather her things, but Damien hesitated. "I really appreciate your insight," he said. "Sometimes, these philanthropic decisions feel like numbers on a spreadsheet. You remind me there are real lives behind every stat." She offered a small smile. "That's why I'm here. These aren't data points, they're people. They matter." A quiet warmth lingered in the air. Damien's eyes drifted to the faint indentation on her ring finger, evidence of a wedding band that once lived there. "I get the sense you have your own story, Jenna." She swallowed, the weight of memory tightening her throat. "We all do," she replied softly, offering no elaboration. Then she glanced at the clock. "I should go pick up my son." The word son seemed to spark something in him, a flicker of intrigue, but he only nodded politely. "Of course, thank you again." As she stood, he rose with her. "Take care." That night, Jenna tried to focus on bedtime routines, baths, lullabies, warm milk, but her thoughts kept straying to Damien's sincerity. She reminded herself, he was just a donor, nothing more. But as she replayed the conversation, she couldn't ignore the rare feeling of being heard. Not managed, not placated, truly heard. Still, she couldn't deny the strange ease she felt around him. She told herself it was just professional interest. Curling up next to Leo's tiny frame, she closed her eyes, unaware that a simple invitation was waiting on the horizon. One that would pull her deeper into Damien Callahan's orbit, test her heart's ability to trust again, and begin a series of events that would one day leave Ryan blindsided by the path his ex-wife was about to take. December arrived in a flurry of events, including the prestigious Summit Gala, an annual fundraiser co-hosted by Callahan Enterprises and several corporate giants. The buzz around Safe Start was that Damien Callahan intended to officially announce his company's partnership at the upcoming event. For Jenna, the invitation was both exciting and intimidating. A formal black-tie gala held at the lavish Rosemont Hotel, packed with Seattle's most elite figures. Monica encouraged Jenna to attend, insisting her presence would show the real-world impact of Callahan Enterprises' donation. But Jenna's modest budget didn't allow for a designer dress or professional hairstyling. She worried about looking out of place among the socialites and CEOs. Monica reassured her the organization would cover the costs. It was, after all, a promotional necessity. Reluctantly, Jenna agreed. She didn't want to risk jeopardizing the potential funding that could change everything for the families they served. The night of the gala, she stepped into the grand ballroom wearing a borrowed black satin gown with delicate beading and simple heels. Her friend, a part-time stylist, had swept her hair into an elegant bun. Clutching the invitation in trembling hands, she stepped into the glittering space. Soft orchestral music drifted through the marbled floors, and the crystal chandeliers poured golden light across the room. Jenna scanned the crowd anxiously, searching for a familiar face. Spotting Monica near a towering ice sculpture, she let out a quiet breath of relief and joined her. After brief introductions to several donors, Jenna sipped ginger ale, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Then she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. Damien Callahan stood behind her, every bit the polished host in a crisp tuxedo. His eyes sparkled with genuine warmth. "I'm glad you made it," he said with a smile. "You look." He paused, as though searching for the right word. "Elegant." A blush crept into her cheeks. "Thank you," she replied softly. "I'm not really used to events like this." She gestured to the swirl of designer gowns and glimmering diamonds. Around her, celebrities, politicians, and business moguls mingled with effortless ease. Damien gently guided her through the room, introducing her to key stakeholders. He encouraged her to share the real stories, the people Safe Start helped every day. Surprisingly, the more Jenna spoke, the more at ease she became. The donors leaned in, listening intently, moved by the authenticity in her voice. She realized that Damien had set her up to shine, not for show, but to put the mission front and center. After the final round of champagne toasts, Damien pulled her aside to a quieter corner. "They've pledged double the amount we anticipated," he said with a quiet smile. "Your passion sealed the deal." Jenna's eyes welled with emotion. She looked around the dazzling ballroom, hardly able to believe that the glitz and glamour of this night would directly impact families who needed it most. "Thank you," she whispered, her gratitude extending not just to the donors, but to Damien, for championing the cause so genuinely. In that softly lit corner, his eyes lingered on her face, something unspoken passing between them. Then the band began to play a slow waltz, and couples floated onto the dance floor. Damien hesitated. "Would you like to dance? Or do you need to get home to your son?" Jenna bit her lip. For once, she just wanted to enjoy a fleeting moment of normalcy. She thought of the bills waiting at home, the unfinished laundry, the exhaustion tugging at her every night. But here, under these lights, for just a minute, she wanted to remember who she was before everything fell apart. "Just one dance," she said quietly. He reached for her hand, guiding her gently onto the polished marble floor. His touch was warm, steady, nothing like the cold, distracted way Ryan used to hold her in public. As the music swelled, Jenna felt a surprising glimmer of contentment. It crept in slowly, like sunlight through a window she hadn't opened in years. Her steps were hesitant at first, but then something in Damien's quiet confidence grounded her. What she didn't realize was that this graceful dance would mark the beginning of a deeper connection, one that would soon reshape her entire life and ripple all the way back to Ryan Carter. The weeks following the gala brought subtle but significant changes to Jenna's routine. Damien Callahan began appearing at Safe Start more frequently, under the guise of monitoring the partnership's progress. But Jenna sensed there was more to it. His visits were never rushed. He didn't check his watch. He brought coffee with her name spelled right. He remembered how she liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. He brought coffee, lingered at her desk, and asked thoughtful questions, often about her experience as a single mom. A quiet bond began to take root. It grew during shared lunches and short walks to a nearby park during her breaks. They laughed more than she expected. And sometimes they didn't talk at all. But those silences felt comfortable, not awkward. At first, Jenna kept her guard up. She had seen what false warmth could lead to, especially in her marriage to Ryan. But the more time she spent with Damien, the more authentic his presence felt. He never pried, though she could tell he was curious. And when she spoke of Leo, his bedtime songs, his baby giggles, Damien listened intently, his attention never wavering. He asked questions only someone truly interested would ask. What song does he like best? Does he say mama yet? And when she talked about Leo's tantrums or milestones, Damien didn't tune out. He leaned in. One Saturday morning, he sent her a message. "Would you help me coordinate a small supply drive? There's a daycare center for working moms that could use diapers, wipes, formula. Callahan Enterprises wants to sponsor it." Jenna hesitated. She usually reserved weekends for Leo. Weekends were sacred. Her world shrank to the size of his giggles and the space between their shared morning pancakes. But the cause aligned so closely with her own mission that she eventually said yes. She began packing Leo's diaper bag, planning to drop him at her neighbor's house. But Damien had other plans. "Bring him," he said simply. "I'd love to meet him." Her heart stuttered at the words. He didn't say it like a man being polite, he said it like someone who meant it. And so Jenna found herself in a sunny suburban community hall, organizing stacks of donated baby clothes, bottles, and care items. Leo toddled around her in wide-eyed wonder, curiously exploring the space. Taking in the new surroundings, Damien arrived with a few staff members from Callahan Enterprises, directing them to arrange a donation table near the front of the hall. Once everything was set up, boxes of formula, diapers, and baby clothes neatly displayed, his attention shifted to Leo. The toddler, all curly hair and wide-eyed wonder, stared up at the tall stranger with fascination. To Jenna's surprise, Damien knelt down to Leo's level and gently offered him a small plush bunny. Leo reached for it, giggling. Over the next hour, Damien continued to engage with him, letting him help place stuffed toys on the table, pulling funny faces that drew bursts of laughter from the little boy. Jenna watched in stunned silence. She had never seen such patient, natural warmth from a man around her child. Not even Ryan, back when he still lived with them, had ever shown this kind of effortless connection with his own son. Once the volunteers wrapped up and the other staff had departed, only Jenna, Damien, and Leo remained. Exhausted from the excitement, Leo dozed off in Jenna's arms. Damien offered them a ride home in his sleek black SUV. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. During the drive, Jenna risked a glance at him. She noticed how his expression softened every time he peeked at Leo through the rearview mirror. Something in her chest stirred, an unfamiliar tangle of gratitude and longing. Later that night, as she rocked Leo to sleep in their modest living room, she couldn't help reflecting on Damien Callahan's nurturing demeanor. She imagined, for the first time, a future in which a man might offer more than criticism and cold distance. A pang of guilt flickered. She was still tangled in the emotional wreckage of her love-hate past with Ryan. But as Leo snuggled closer to her chest, she realized something startling. Her son had instinctively taken to Damien's gentle presence, and that single, innocent truth began to chip away at the guarded walls she had spent months building. But just as this budding connection with Damien began to quietly bloom, Jenna's world was rattled by a sudden phone call one gray afternoon. The screen flashed with a name she hadn't seen in months, Ryan Carter. Her stomach tightened. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the decline button, but a blend of curiosity and the ghost of past pain pushed her to answer. His voice came through with an edge she hadn't heard before. "Jenna, I need to see you. It's important." A wave of irritation surged. "What for, Ryan? We've been divorced for months." "I know," he sighed heavily. "But can I come by? Or maybe meet somewhere neutral? Please, I have something I need to tell you." Against her better judgment, Jenna agreed to meet him at a small cafe near her workplace. After her shift, she dropped Leo off with her neighbor and made her way there, her heart pounding as old memories clawed their way back. She spotted Ryan by the window, anxiously tapping his fingers against a coffee cup. He looked older, stressed. Wrinkles creased his forehead, and the tailored perfection he once prided himself on was replaced by a wrinkled, disheveled suit. "Thanks for meeting me," Ryan said, rising a little awkwardly as she approached. Jenna gave a polite nod and took the seat across from him. A thick silence settled between them before Ryan finally spoke. "In a rush. Messed up?" "Jenna, life after the divorce, it hasn't been good." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I lost my job at the investment firm. My finances are a disaster, and the relationship I jumped into, that ended too." He laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it, just the frayed edge of a man unraveling. He looked at her with a pleading expression, clearly fishing for sympathy. Jenna's jaw clenched. He had left her alone with a newborn while he pursued success, and now he wanted to offload his mess onto her? She took a slow breath, steadying herself. She had promised she'd stay calm. "I'm sorry things didn't work out," she said evenly. "But what does that have to do with me?" Ryan fidgeted, spinning the coffee cup between his hands. "I miss Leo. I want to see him, maybe be part of his life again." The words, though hesitant, hit her like a jolt. He had never shown real interest in being a father before. Not when Leo was colicky and crying at 3 a.m. Not when the hospital bills piled up. Not when she came home from work so exhausted she couldn't stand. She studied his posture. There was tension there, a man backed into a corner by the weight of his own regrets. Part of Jenna wanted to explode. "Where were you when I was alone, scraping by, exhausted and scared?" But she held back, letting the ache simmer. "It's not that simple, Ryan," she said quietly. "Leo's just over a year old now. He doesn't know you. You can't just pop in and out whenever you feel like it." He rubbed his temples. "I know I messed up, but can you really blame me for trying to make it right?" His voice cracked slightly, and for a brief second, something in her softened, but it vanished just as quickly. She wasn't sure how much of his remorse was real. Still, there was a flicker of something. Regret, maybe, or just desperation. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice tight. "But don't get your hopes up. I'm not going to let you hurt him." A muscle twitched in his jaw. He nodded, but it felt performative, like a man rehearsing humility. not living it. The meeting ended on a strange, heavy note. As Ryan slouched out into the soft drizzle, Jenna sat for a moment longer, watching him disappear through the window. Her chest churned with confusion and anger. Back at home, her thoughts swirled. On one hand, there was a sense of justice in seeing Ryan finally face the consequences of his choices. But on the other, what if he let Leo down again? What if letting him in now only led to more pain later? That evening, Damien texted her. "Everything okay? You seemed a little off at work today." Jenna stared at the screen, her heart caught between the calm of his concern and the storm Ryan had just reignited. She typed back simply, "I'm fine, thanks for asking." But the lie sat heavy on her tongue. But inside, she was anything but fine. Fate, it seemed, had dragged Ryan back into her life at the exact moment a new door was beginning to open. And soon, the collision of those two worlds would trigger a chain of events no one could have seen coming. Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting the city in a quiet, shimmering hush. Winter had arrived in Seattle, and Safe Start was closing out another successful quarter, thanks in no small part to Callahan Enterprises' support. Thanks to Callahan Enterprises' generous funding, Jenna found herself increasingly within Damien's orbit. He stopped by the office often, sometimes to brainstorm new outreach strategies, other times to invite her to charity dinners or events. Their bond grew steadily, rooted in mutual respect and a shared sense of purpose. One crisp December evening, Damien invited Jenna to attend a small charity event celebrating the opening of a new transitional housing complex. She felt a pang of guilt leaving Leo with her neighbor again. But the cause was close to her heart. And deep down, a small, unspoken part of her longed for the space to feel like more than just a single mom juggling survival. Dressed in a simple navy dress and wrapped in a warm coat to fight off the Seattle chill, she arrived at the church hall where the event was held. Damien, looking effortlessly elegant in a charcoal gray suit, greeted her at the entrance, a soft warmth radiating from his every gesture. Inside, the modest hall was lined with photos of families who would benefit from the new housing initiative. Jenna spoke passionately to the attendees, explaining how permanent shelter could break cycles of poverty and restore dignity to struggling households. Damien stood at her side, smiling with admiration, introducing her to key donors and praising her commitment. There was pride in his voice when he spoke of her, and Jenna caught a few guests glancing between them with curious smiles. Whispers of something unspoken but seen. Later, as the night wound down, they stepped outside into softly falling snow. The city lights reflected off the icy sidewalks, creating a glittering mosaic beneath their feet. As they approached her car, Damien stopped beneath a flickering street lamp, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. There was a nervous energy about him Jenna hadn't seen before. The kind that made her heart skip because Damien was rarely unsettled. But tonight, he was. "I've been thinking about something," he began, his voice low. "You and Leo, you've brought something into my life I didn't even realize was missing." He took a breath, his words swirling into the cold air. "I used to think wealth and purpose were enough, but you showed me the power of connection, of showing up for someone. My work feels different now, more meaningful." He hesitated, then continued, voice even softer. "What if we tried to be more than friends?" Jenna's breath caught. They'd tiptoed around this possibility, stolen glances, half-spoken thoughts, but hearing it out loud knocked something loose inside her. After everything with Ryan, after all the damage, was she really ready? Damien seemed to sense her hesitation. "I know your trust was broken before," he said gently. "I'd never push you. But I need you to know, I love you, Jenna. I want to be part of your life, and Leo's, if you'll let me." Tears stung the corners of her eyes. No one had spoken words like that to her in years. Not without strings, not without expectation. Just love. Steady and clear. Emotion and fear warred inside her. She thought of Ryan, how charming he'd once been, and how that charm had crumbled into pain. But Damien wasn't Ryan. He'd been patient, consistent, respectful, kind. Still, the words were almost too much. Her voice trembled. I care about you too," Jenna whispered, her voice trembling. "But I have to protect my son." Damien nodded, a mixture of relief and tenderness softening his expression. "We'll go at your pace," he said gently. "I just needed you to know how I feel." She leaned slightly into his warmth, heart pounding. Snowflakes landed on her eyelashes, melting into trembling tears she tried to hold back. It had been so long since someone offered her patience instead of pressure, presence instead of promises. She couldn't offer a promise, at least not yet. But in that quiet, snow-dusted moment on the street, she felt something shift. A door in her heart cracked open. Damien Callahan's confession lingered in the air. Hopeful, patient. A vow that, if nurtured carefully, might change everything. As the holiday season reached its height, Jenna found herself caught in a tangle of emotions. Damien's heartfelt words echoed in her thoughts. She confided in Carmen, who beamed with encouragement. "Not everyone gets a second chance," Carmen told her, "especially not with a man who's the real deal." Jenna tried to smile, but her mind tugged in two directions: the fear of history repeating and the fragile hope that maybe, this time, love wouldn't end in ruin. But even as her heart leaned toward something new, Ryan's recent call loomed large. His request to see Leo hovered like a shadow. Jenna feared exposing her son to a father who might vanish just as quickly as he returned. New Year's Eve arrived, bringing both excitement and nervousness. Damien had invited Jenna and Leo to spend the holiday at a cozy mountain cabin he'd rented in the Olympic Peninsula, along with a few close friends. At first, Jenna hesitated. Traveling with a toddler to meet strangers sounded overwhelming. She envisioned worst-case scenarios: Leo crying all night, awkward conversations, not fitting in. But Damien's gentle reassurance and the dream of a true holiday escape convinced her. The cabin was nestled in a snowy forest, its warm lights glowing against the frost-covered trees. Inside, the crackling fire cast a golden hue across the wood-paneled walls. Damien's friends, a blend of childhood companions and philanthropic partners, welcomed Jenna warmly. They didn't treat her like Damien's charity project, the way people in Ryan's circle once had. They treated her like she belonged. They fussed over Leo, who squealed with joy at the unfamiliar sights: the fireplace, the snowflakes outside the windows. The evening unfolded with laughter and warmth. Over a spread of hearty homemade stews, fresh-baked bread, and holiday pastries, Jenna felt an unexpected ease. Despite being among near strangers, she didn't feel out of place. Damien stayed close, making sure she was never left behind during conversation, especially when topics veered into the technical aspects of charity strategy or business talk. Every time she felt the old instinct to shrink back or excuse herself, Damien would glance her way with a subtle nod, silently saying, "I've got you." Later that night, with Leo dozing peacefully in a makeshift crib by the fire, the adults sipped champagne and shared stories of the past year. They spoke of growth, dreams, and resolutions. As midnight neared, everyone stepped outside into the crisp mountain air to watch the private fireworks Damien had arranged. Jenna wrapped a thick blanket around herself, cradling a sleepy Leo in her arms. The sky erupted in a cascade of brilliant colors, bursts of pink, gold, and green painting the snowy forest in fleeting light. Gentle oohs and ahs accompanied each explosion overhead. Damien moved beside her. In the shimmer of fireworks, his face lit up, calm, content, full of quiet admiration. He gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "Thank you for coming. I know this might feel like a leap." Jenna smiled, leaning into him. "A leap, yes. But it feels right." At the stroke of midnight, the group around them erupted in cheers, embracing one another with laughter and joy. Damien carefully took Leo from Jenna's arms, pressing a gentle kiss to the boy's forehead. Then he turned to Jenna, his eyes filled with emotion, illuminated by the blaze of fireworks above. He leaned in and kissed her softly. Time slowed. The kiss was tender, filled with unspoken promises and quiet hope. In that moment, Jenna realized she was stepping into a new chapter, one that could look nothing like the life she had known before. A rush of gratitude flooded through her, along with a deep awareness of how complicated things could still become. Because love stories aren't only about sparkling lights and perfect moments, they're also about the tangled realities that resurface when least expected. And soon enough, Ryan would make his next move. January ushered in new routines. Jenna continued moving forward in measured steps with Damien. They spent more time together outside of work, sharing simple dinners at her home, where he helped feed Leo, earning bursts of giggles with silly spoon tricks. Jenna was touched by how naturally and willingly Damien adapted to the rhythms of life with a small child. Ryan, meanwhile, remained on the fringes, texting her sporadically. He occasionally asked if she'd reconsider letting him see Leo. Jenna stayed cautious, holding firm to her boundaries. She told him that if he truly wanted to be part of Leo's life, he'd need to show consistency, stable work, counseling, some proof that he was serious about change. To her surprise, Ryan responded that he'd taken a new position at a smaller firm and had started seeing a therapist. It was a small gesture, but not enough to earn back her trust. Then, on a cool Saturday afternoon, Damien invited Jenna and Leo to Callahan Enterprises' annual staff celebration. It was a large gathering held at a countryside estate outside the city, with employees, executives, and their families in attendance. Jenna hesitated, unsure if bringing Leo was the right call, but Damien reassured her that the event was family-friendly, and he'd love for both of them to come. With a nervous but hopeful heart, she agreed. The estate's sprawling grounds were dotted with winter gardens, bonfire pits, and a heated pavilion for children's activities. Inside, the main hall buzzed with music and the scent of mulled cider. Live acoustic guitar strummed gently in the background as people mingled and laughed. Leo, bundled in a warm coat, toddled after a small cluster of other kids, his big brown eyes full of wonder. Jenna stayed close, introducing herself to Callahan Enterprises' staff, some of whom recognized her from event photos with Damien. She had expected judgment, perhaps whispers of gold digging or speculation, but to her surprise, many of them were kind, even warm. A few commented on how much Damien had changed since meeting her, that he seemed lighter, more grounded. During a quiet moment, Damien guided Jenna out onto a terrace overlooking a frozen lake. The stillness of winter wrapped around them, broken only by the faint laughter of children playing in the distance. He turned toward her, his expression unusually serious. "Jenna, I want you to know, I've been thinking about the future." Her heart thudded. "We've only just begun," she said softly. "I'm still finding my footing." He gently took her hand. "I understand. But there's something else you should know. My mother, Celia Callahan, is returning from Europe next week. She's traditional when it comes to our family's image. I suspect she'll be wary about me dating a single mom." A flicker of tension passed across his face. "I want you to be prepared. I'll stand by you, of course, but I know how she can be." Jenna swallowed hard, old memories flashing, memories of how Ryan's social circle had whispered and judged her, labeled her as not enough. She drew in a breath and gave a steady nod. "I'm not ashamed of my life, or my son. If she wants to judge, that's on her, but it won't change how I feel about you." Damien's expression softened with relief. He pulled her closer and she rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of pine from the estate's evergreens. Still, beneath the serenity, an undercurrent of apprehension rippled through her. Jenna sensed a confrontation ahead. Because when love meets status and societal expectation, turmoil often follows. And elsewhere in the city, Ryan was making plans of his own, determined not to be erased from the new life Jenna was building. Jenna's first meeting with Celia Callahan took place at an understated brunch in one of Seattle's elegant townhouses. Damien had arranged it, hoping to strike a cordial tone from the start. Jenna's stomach churned with nerves. She dressed conservatively, choosing a soft blue blouse and slacks. Leo wore a sweet pastel outfit, his hair neatly combed. Upon arrival, the doorman escorted them into a refined sitting room where Celia awaited, a tall woman in her early 60s with unmistakable grace and an air of practiced elegance. Celia rose from a velvet armchair and greeted Damien with a reserved embrace. Then her gaze fell on Jenna and the child in her arms. A nearly imperceptible flicker of surprise passed across Celia's face. She offered a polite, if cool, smile. "Miss Morales, a pleasure to meet you." "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan," Jenna replied with a respectful nod. "This is my son, Leo." Celia's eyes swept over the child. "Oh, hello there, little one." She extended a slender finger, which Leo eyed with guarded curiosity. Sensing the subtle tension in the room, Damien quickly guided them toward the dining table, where fine china gleamed under soft light. Quiet servers poured tea into porcelain cups as they settled in. Celia began the conversation with gentle small talk, though her undertone held a calculating curiosity. She asked about Jenna's background, her work at Safe Start, and her family. When asked about her job at Safe Start, Jenna responded earnestly. She shared her background with quiet confidence, though she couldn't shake the feeling of being carefully examined. Celia Callahan wasn't overtly unkind, but something in her composed, unblinking gaze made it clear. She was weighing every word, silently assessing whether Jenna could ever belong within the Callahan legacy. The clink of silverware, the perfectly symmetrical floral arrangements, even the soft chamber music playing in the background, everything in this townhouse brunch screamed control. And Jenna, despite her poise, felt like a thread out of place in a tightly woven tapestry. Damien made an effort to shift the conversation toward philanthropic interests, speaking highly of Jenna's impact on new outreach programs. Celia nodded graciously, but maintained her distance. Midway through the meal, she delicately set down her teacup and folded her hands. "Damien has spoken of a serious attachment here," she said calmly, her voice smooth and poised. "I'm curious, what are your plans for the future, Miss Morales?" Heat flushed Jenna's cheeks. The question was about more than tomorrow. It was a subtle probe into status, stability, and the unspoken standards of the Callahan name. She took a steady breath. "I'm committed to raising my son and continuing my work with Safe Start. Damien and I have grown close, but we're taking things step by step. Our focus is creating a stable future for Leo." There was a faint twitch in Celia's eyebrow, polished but telling, like Jenna had given the wrong answer on a test she hadn't studied for. Celia's eyes flicked to her son, then back to Jenna. "And the child's father? Are there entanglements we should be aware of?" The air turned colder. Jenna felt it in her collarbone, the way a woman knows when she's no longer being questioned, she's being sized up. Before Jenna could speak, Damien cut in with quiet firmness. "That's not something you need to worry about, Mother. Jenna has full custody." Celia's lips pressed into a thin line, but her tone softened just slightly. "I don't mean to intrude," she said, "but I've seen how complicated family situations can become. The Callahans have always protected their own. Damien's future is tied to certain responsibilities." Responsibilities. Jenna heard the word like a verdict, a polite way of saying this isn't personal, it's just legacy. But what about love? What about character? Jenna felt her spine stiffen. The implication was clear. She and Leo might be seen as a burden, or worse, a risk. But she gathered herself and offered a polite, composed smile. "I understand your concern. Damien and I are handling things together. My only priority is Leo's well-being." It was a diplomatic response, but beneath the words was fire. A silent promise that she would never apologize for being a mother, or for surviving. The brunch ended with a veneer of civility, polished but far from comfortable. As Damien escorted Jenna and Leo out, he leaned in close. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I know my mother can be intense, but I won't let her come between us." Jenna exhaled slowly and hugged Leo a little tighter. She was reminded of how Ryan's mother used to make sly remarks about her background and ambitions. This felt achingly similar. Yet Damien's steady support gave her something she hadn't had before: reassurance. Still, she knew this relationship would be tested. By money, by expectations, by the ghosts of past relationships. Only time would tell if their fragile new connection could survive it all. And as always, time had surprises of its own, waiting just around the corner. Jenna avoided direct confrontations with Celia, trusting that with time, she might soften, or at least tolerate the relationship. Meanwhile, Ryan's repeated requests to see Leo gnawed at her more each day. She weighed the emotional risk of letting him back into their son's life. Could a father-child bond even take root this late, especially after all the heartbreak he'd caused? Every time his name lit up her phone, a pulse of dread followed. The past didn't knock. It barged in, loud and entitled. One late afternoon, after finishing her shift at Safe Start, Jenna received a cryptic message from Ryan. "I'm in town. Let me see him. 1 hour. Cafe on Maple Street. No more excuses." She exhaled, her fingers trembling around the phone. She was half tempted to delete the message outright, but something in his tone hinted at desperation beyond the usual guilt or entitlement. "Fine, tomorrow, 2 p.m., she replied, "but I'm not promising anything." The next day, she brought Leo, nervous, cautious, and frankly dreading it. She hated the thought of reintroducing her son to the man who had walked out on them both. Ryan was already there, tucked into a corner booth, looking thinner, worn down. His sharpness had dulled. The confidence he once wore like a tailored suit was now frayed at the edges. His eyes widened the moment he saw Leo, a vibrant toddler now, with bouncy curls and curious eyes. Jenna saw it then, the slump in his shoulders, the sudden welling of tears in his eyes. "He's grown so much," Ryan whispered hoarsely. At first, Leo clung to Jenna's leg, wary of the unfamiliar man. But gently, she coaxed him toward Ryan's lap. The boy studied him closely. Minutes passed awkwardly. Then Ryan made a silly face, and Leo giggled. A fleeting moment of connection bloomed between them, like a glimpse into a version of life that never got to exist. Jenna felt a sharp tug in her chest, a longing for what might have been. A small, stupid ache that whispered, maybe he could have been different. Maybe this could have been easier. But the warmth didn't last long. Ryan shifted in his seat. "Listen, Jenna, I've been struggling. I lost my job. Money's tight. I'm behind on rent." She sat upright, tense. He cleared his throat, avoiding her gaze. "I was wondering, maybe you could help me out, or maybe your new boyfriend could." The temperature around them seemed to drop. Her blood ran cold. "What did you just say?" Ryan leaned forward, eyes flicking around nervously. "Look, I know this Damien Callahan guy has money. If you two are serious, maybe he could help out. You're asking me to beg Damien for money? To bail you out?" She snapped. "That's insane, Ryan." There it was, the real reason for the visit. Not fatherhood, not guilt, just need. He reached across the table and grabbed her wrist, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You owe me. We had plans, until you decided to keep the baby. Then you blew up our marriage." His grip wasn't hard, but it was invasive, and the implication behind his words hit like a slap. Color flooded her cheeks. Jenna yanked her arm away, her heart slamming in her chest. "You left me alone with Leo. Don't you dare rewrite what happened." Leo whimpered at the tension, his big eyes filling with tears. Ryan's face twisted with frustration. "Don't test me, Jenna. If Callahan's really in the picture, maybe I'll fight for custody. You know how the system works. A millionaire fiancé, a judge might question your stability." "I know how the legal system works," Ryan said, his voice low and sharp. "Your new fiancé is a millionaire. Judges might see you as unstable, jumping from a broken marriage to another man." Jenna trembled, instinctively pulling Leo close. This wasn't just desperation, it was blackmail. Plain and simple. The shift in Ryan's tone had been chilling. His earlier tears, the brief flicker of fatherly affection, they were all part of a performance. And now, the mask had slipped. "Stay away from us," she growled, her voice trembling with fury. Scooping up Leo, she bolted from the cafe, tears burning her eyes as she raced home through the cold Seattle streets. She barely remembered the route, only the thud of her heartbeat, the sound of Leo crying softly against her shoulder, and the haunting echo of Ryan's threat. Her mind was a storm of panic and rage. Ryan's desperation had twisted into something cruel, something dangerous. He was threatening a custody battle, one that could shatter the fragile peace she had finally found with Damien. That evening, Jenna told Damien everything. His jaw clenched in silent fury. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you both," he said firmly. "I promise. We'll handle this legally, completely." He pulled her into his arms, and for a moment she allowed herself to collapse into the comfort of him, because for the first time someone wasn't asking her to face it alone. But even as he reassured her, Jenna felt a shiver run down her spine. She had just found something precious, and now her past threatened to tear it all away. What she didn't know was that the next chapter of her life would accelerate faster than any of them imagined, and deliver a revelation that would leave Ryan utterly blindsided. The weight of Ryan's threat hung heavily over Jenna and Damien. To get ahead of any legal ambush, Damien arranged a meeting with a top-tier family law attorney. The lawyer confirmed Ryan could technically file for partial custody, but only if he had strong evidence that Jenna was unfit. Thankfully, the attorney reassured them Ryan's inconsistent presence, unemployment, and recent behavior would severely weaken any case he tried to build. Still, the anxiety lingered. Seeing Jenna struggle under the pressure, Damien insisted on hiring a private legal team, paid entirely by Callahan Enterprises. At first, Jenna resisted. She didn't want to seem dependent on his wealth. The ghosts of past judgments, Celia's cold glances, society's whispers, still clung to her. But ultimately, her priority was Leo's safety. She agreed, reluctantly but gratefully. Meanwhile, Celia Callahan remained cautious, still not fully convinced Jenna was the right fit. Though she voiced no direct objections, her silence was judgment enough. Amid the tension and legal preparations, Damien planned something quiet, something simple. One breezy spring evening, he invited Jenna and Leo to visit a newly renovated playground, funded by the Callahan Foundation, nestled in a picturesque park near the Puget Sound. Children laughed and chased one another across the soft turf. Leo squealed in delight, racing between swings and slides. A kind volunteer caretaker offered to watch over him, allowing Jenna and Damien a few rare moments alone. They walked slowly along the water's edge, where tall lanterns cast a golden glow. The sun dipped low, turning the sky into streaks of lavender and orange. Jenna inhaled the cool, clean air, grateful for the peace, however temporary. Damien was quiet beside her, hands in his pockets, brow furrowed, deep in thought. At a scenic overlook by the water, Damien came to a stop, turning to face her. "Jenna," he said, his voice soft and trembling. "These last few months have been more meaningful than any part of my life. You and Leo, you filled a space I didn't even realize was empty." He paused, then drew a deep breath and sank to one knee. The world tilted slightly. For a split second, Jenna forgot how to breathe. Jenna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, eyes welling with tears. There he was, Damien Callahan, the philanthropic millionaire who had once walked unannounced into her nonprofit office, now kneeling before her with a small velvet box in his hand. The diamond inside shimmered under the glow of the lanterns lining the path. "I know things are complicated," he continued, emotion thick in his voice, "but I want to protect you, stand by you, and be a father to Leo, if you'll let me." He opened the box. "Jenna Morales, will you marry me?" Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. The world around her went quiet, no past, no doubt, just this moment, raw, overwhelming, and real. Her mind flashed to all the heartache with Ryan, the pain, the doubts, the years of doing everything alone. But Damien's love had been steady, unwavering, even when threatened, even when judged. She looked at the ring, then at the man who had never flinched in the face of her reality. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking. Damien stood, wrapping her in his arms, lifting her into a warm, spinning embrace. Their lips met in a kiss, tender, emotional, real. The breeze swirled around them, stirring her hair as a few passers-by nearby, realizing what had just happened, broke into applause. Jenna clung to him, laughing and crying at once, her heart pounding with something she hadn't felt in years, hope without fear. Jenna laughed through her tears, turning to see Leo toddling toward them with the caretaker, as if he too had sensed the gravity of the moment. For Jenna, the proposal felt like diving off a cliff, terrifying, exhilarating. But Damien's love gave her the courage to finally believe in a future where her past no longer had the power to hold her back. Meanwhile, across the city, Ryan would soon learn of the engagement, in a way that would shatter his assumptions and push him closer to the edge. The final confrontation loomed just ahead, promising truths that no one could have predicted. In the whirlwind weeks that followed, the Callahan family moved quickly to organize an intimate yet elegant wedding. Celia Callahan maintained a veneer of civility, though Jenna could feel the skepticism that still lingered beneath the surface. Still, Damien made it clear he didn't want a spectacle. Only close friends, family, and a handful of colleagues. Jenna's co-workers from Safe Start were among those specially invited. When Jenna informed Ryan, more out of courtesy than any need for approval, Ryan's reaction came first in stunned silence, and then in a relentless storm of text messages, demanding explanations, accusing Jenna of robbing him of a chance to make things right. His words bled with resentment. "You never gave me time. You never believed in me." But Jenna had read those lines before, in different forms with different excuses. This time she chose not to reply. She ignored them. She wouldn't let his manipulation poison her joy. She had already handled the legal groundwork, ensuring her attorney was prepared in case Ryan tried to sabotage anything. Let him rage. She had built her peace with bricks he once shattered. The wedding day arrived, clear and bright. Sunlight spilled through the stained glass windows of a small, charming chapel Damien had chosen for the ceremony. Jenna stood in a simple yet elegant lace gown, her hands trembling slightly as Carmen adjusted her veil, beaming with sisterly pride. In the corner, Monica dabbed her eyes with a tissue and whispered how she had never seen Jenna look so radiant. Little Leo, dressed in a miniature white suit with suspenders, clung to Jenna's side, occasionally babbling with joy. She glanced down at her son and felt the full weight of the journey she had endured. Divorce, heartbreak, the terrifying beauty of single motherhood, and now a future opening wide with possibility. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was survival made sacred. She inhaled deeply and stepped into the aisle as the soft melody of a violin filled the chapel. Damien stood waiting at the altar, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his gaze locked onto hers with open, unwavering affection. As Jenna approached him, she saw the tears glinting in his eyes. The officiant's words became a blur, wrapped in emotion. She felt Damien gently brush his thumb over her knuckles, a grounding gesture steadying her heart. They exchanged vows, sincere and full of intention, each line infused with promises of love, mutual trust, and a shared commitment to Leo's happiness and well-being. "By the power vested in me," the officiant concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Applause and quiet cheers filled the chapel. Damien leaned in, sealing their union with a kiss, tender, full of promise. And in that very moment, Ryan slipped in through the back of the chapel, uninvited. He froze. From the altar, Jenna caught a glimpse of him. Their eyes met, charged and electric. A storm behind glass. She felt the past collide with the present in that silent second. For a tense heartbeat, no one moved. Then Ryan surged forward, striding up the aisle, ignoring the stunned silence that fell over the pews. Jenna's breath hitched. Damien immediately stepped between her and Ryan, calm but protective. "You really did it," Ryan spat, his voice cutting through the air. "Marrying into money without even giving me a chance to fix what we had?" Jenna steadied herself. "We haven't been a family for a long time, Ryan," she said firmly. "You made your choices. Now I've made mine." Her voice didn't waver. "Not this time. Not anymore." Ryan's face twisted. He opened his mouth for another outburst, but Damien quietly signaled to the security team. 2 ushers appeared and calmly guided Ryan back down the aisle. He resisted at first, barking threats that no one took seriously. The sound of the door closing behind him was louder than any shout, a final punctuation on a chapter Jenna had long outgrown. The moment the doors closed behind him, Jenna exhaled in trembling relief. Damien turned and pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the chapel slowly filled again with warmth, applause, and the quiet joy of a future hard won. The guests exhaled in a wave of collective empathy. The ceremony might have veered into chaos, but the vow was sealed. Jenna, now Mrs. Callahan, stood with her head high, a defiant surge of strength rising in her chest. Ryan's last-ditch stunt had failed, and in doing so, only highlighted how far she'd come. In the days following the wedding, Jenna and Damien Callahan escaped on a short honeymoon to a quiet villa nestled on the coast of Santorini, Greece, with Leo in tow. The island's whitewashed buildings and crystal blue waters offered the kind of peace she'd only dreamed of. Each morning, they lingered over breakfast on a sun-drenched terrace while Leo toddled after butterflies and explored the winding stone paths. For the first time in years, Jenna's laughter came easily, unburdened. The rhythm of peace was foreign, but welcome. Each evening, they sipped local wine as the sun dipped below the horizon, talking about the future. Plans to expand Safe Start, dreams of a stable, love-filled home, and maybe, one day, giving Leo a sibling. Ryan's dramatic appearance at the wedding had rattled them both, but Damien's quiet, steady love never faltered. If any custody threat remained, they trusted the legal team to handle it. For the first time in years, Jenna felt secure. She was no longer living in reaction to the past. She was building something real. Something lasting, with someone who loved her and Leo without hesitation. But everything shifted the day they returned to Seattle. Waiting at the door of the Callahan penthouse was a thick envelope. Inside, a paternity test result, addressed to Ryan Carter. Jenna's eyes scanned the document, her breath catching as she read the line. Probability of paternity, 0%. A note was scrawled across the bottom in Ryan's messy handwriting. "So you see, Leo was never mine. I hope you're proud." Her heart pounded as she stared at the paper. Ryan, not Leo's biological father? The floor beneath her seemed to tilt. Logic collided with emotion. Her mind couldn't catch up with the betrayal blooming in her chest. Numbness overtook her. She mentally retraced everything. The timeline, her pregnancy, she had never been unfaithful. Could the test be real? Had there been a mistake at the clinic? Could it be falsified? Damien, sensing her shock, gently took the papers from her trembling hands. He read them silently, then looked at her, jaw set. "This is nonsense," he said firmly. "We both know your story. This doesn't change what's real." But Jenna couldn't stop the doubt from curling around her spine like smoke. What if there had been a lab error? Or worse, what if this was Ryan's final act of sabotage, carefully crafted to plant a seed of uncertainty where there had once been healing? The following week, Damien's legal team uncovered the truth. Ryan had submitted the test in a final legal ploy, trying to disqualify himself from child support by claiming zero paternity. His tactic? Argue that if he wasn't the biological father, he had no financial or parental responsibility, no rights, and no obligations. Jenna felt sick. After threatening to fight for custody, now he wanted to erase himself from Leo's life completely? To her, it wasn't just cruel, it was cowardice. The kind that cloaked itself in paperwork instead of parenting. But why claim zero paternity now? After insisting on visitation? After crashing her wedding? Callahan's legal team swiftly dismissed the entire ordeal as a desperate stunt, likely orchestrated to provoke Jenna into confrontation. It was pathetic, really. A last gasp from a man who couldn't control the narrative anymore. But even a weak threat can cast a long shadow. Still, the emotional weight lingered. Damien gently encouraged her to get an independent DNA test, if only to quiet the lingering doubt. She agreed. Waiting for the results felt like being trapped in someone else's story, a story she never agreed to, but had to finish anyway. The results reaffirmed what she had always known in her heart. Ryan was Leo's biological father. The forged test had been just that, fabricated chaos, meant to hurt and confuse. With this final act of deception exposed, Ryan's intentions became crystal clear. Manipulate, deflect, and dodge responsibility. As the Callahans closed this turbulent chapter, word of the so-called paternity scandal rippled through high society circles, reaching the same lips that had once whispered rumors of Jenna being a gold digger. But the truth spread faster than the lies. The same people who once raised eyebrows at Jenna now shook their heads in disbelief at Ryan's audacity. The tide had turned, not because she fought loudly, but because she stood firmly. The fraudulent nature of Ryan's evidence quickly overshadowed the gossip, and in the end, the scandal he hoped would shame Jenna only served to unmask him as a liar and coward. Finally free from his manipulations, Jenna embraced her new life with open arms. She had learned that when false narratives fall apart, they make space for something real to grow. Sometimes the deepest heartbreaks become doorways to unexpected hope. What once felt like survival had become something more, thriving. For Jenna Morales, divorce had once felt like a final chapter. But it wasn't the ending she feared. In the struggle to raise her child alone, she found an unexpected light in Damien Callahan, a man whose generosity reached far beyond any financial means. Together, they dismantled prejudice, navigated familial resistance, and overcame the schemes of a desperate ex. They didn't just rebuild, they redefined what love could look like. Through quiet courage and unshakable trust, they built something extraordinary, a love story that honored Jenna's independence while wrapping Leo in unconditional, fatherly devotion. If you were moved by this journey of broken vows, rediscovered trust, and the unpredictable turns of fate, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. Tales filled with heart, twists, and the unstoppable belief that every ending can also be a beginning. Thank you for walking beside Jenna's story. And remember, true love isn't measured by wealth, but by the unwavering choice to stand by one another, no matter what.